Welcome to the Inappropriate Growth Podcast, where we explore the unconventional paths to success. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce a man whose career is as impressive as it is inspiring. James Brown, from launching his first bankruptcy firm fresh out of law school to becoming a beacon of knowledge in the legal industry, James has not only mastered the art of growth, but has also dedicated himself to teaching others to do the same. James Brown is a visionary who saw beyond the courtroom and into the heart of business strategy. James quickly made his mark by opening his first firm in St. Louis, Missouri in 1994. His innovative systems, policies, and procedures led to rapid expansion, with offices becoming the top filing bankruptcy firms in their respective districts. He didn't stop there. He embraced the power of collective wisdom by joining mastermind groups in 2008 and later channeled his passion for mentorship into coaching. Grab your seats as we dive into the mind of a man who's not just practicing, but he's shaping the future of legal entrepreneurship. James Brown, welcome to the show. Let's get busy.
Welcome to Inappropriate Growth, the podcast where we get real about the grind behind the glory. I'm Paul, your host, and I'm here to take you on a journey through the untold stories of business triumphs. We might raise some eyebrows, but it's all about the hustle and we don't fit the mold. Here we're talking about the kind of effort that doesn't just push the envelope, it shreds it to pieces. We're building a community where the norm is to defy norms. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into the beginnings that were anything but humble. The times when giving up seemed like the only option. We'll also dig into all of those wild, insane, and out-of-the-box strategies that led to massive growth. From growth hacks to best practices, this podcast will be fast, furious, and should be a whole lot of fun. Join us as we redefine what it means to grow and turn business growth into an art form. Welcome to Inappropriate Growth.
All right, well, today I am happy to have the owner of Perseverance Squared, Mr. James Brown on Inappropriate Growth. Another James Brown was famously dubbed the Godfather of Soul. This James might better be described as the Godfather of law firm growth. James, please share with the audience where you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Yeah, so I'm based out of St. Louis, Missouri. I own my own law firm for 21 years. Started that law firm right out of law school. So basically out of necessity, not by choice. I worked for General Motors for 12 years. I was on the assembly line building cars through undergraduate and law school, and 528 cars a day to be exact. And
it seems like a lot.
Right when I was taking the bar exam, they announced they were going to close the plant. And so it was like, what do you do now? So I did what everybody else in law school did and sent out 200 plus resumes to all of the local firms. And I got zero response, absolutely nothing. So being married already and having 3 kids, we decided to open our own law firm, and we went into consumer bankruptcy work. And right off the bat, it was just me and my wife, and we're doing maybe 3 or 4 cases a week, just copying what everybody else was doing and getting, at the time, what I thought was mediocre results. So I started studying human behavior and marketing and what makes people take action. And I created some new marketing messages, and the first week that we ran those messages, we signed 68 new clients. The second week was 72 clients. The third week was 63. And it never dropped below 50 a week from that point forward. So that was where we launched into the stratosphere. Then 2 years later, we opened an office in Detroit, Michigan. Then 2 years after that in Kansas City. And then about 5 years after that in Miami.
your expansion strategy, I mean, were you duplicating identical systems?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
we
systems, policy,
literally.
procedures. How important is it to standardize that when you're scaling like this?
Oh, it's huge. One of the biggest benefits I see to owning the business, the money is great, right? But it's buying my time back. And so when we went to, just in the St. Louis office, we went from doing 3 to 4 cases a week to 60s. I had to hire people, right? I wouldn't wish this on anybody, but I hired 9 people in about 45 days. And so we were dropping balls, right? And I had to go in front of the federal judge, and he admonished me for it and said, not in a bar complaint kind of way thing, but he was like, Mr. Brown, you know what? I'm gonna continue all your cases. I had 100 cases on the docket that day. He said, I'm just gonna continue them all, and you need to get your crap together, basically in front of all these people. So it forced me to have to go back and literally build the systems. And so I think of it in terms of like McDonald's, right? Probably the best example of systems that run a business. Any 16-year-old there makes the same cheeseburger. It tastes the same no matter what McDonald's you go to. And if that 16-year-old decides to not show up today, you stick another 16-year-old in there and it tastes the same, right? So that to me is the best example of systems that run a business and not people.
Right.
And so as we built out the systems from our marketing all the way to the end of the case, and then we cross-trained people, now I had a system that was running my business. And if somebody wasn't there, the backup automatically stepped in and did the work. And the backup to them, so everything was covered, and now I bought my time back.
But those individuals, I'm thinking more of the leadership style. I mean, because you do have lawyers, there's a vetting process to get into law school. Then there's a vetting process to stay in law school and graduate. Then there's a third vetting process to pass the bar exam. So what you've got in lawyers, which is very different, I would imagine, from first job employees, teenagers at a McDonald's, you've got a mix of personalities, high IQ, rightfully so most of the time. Lawyers think pretty highly of themselves. But when it comes to leadership, I mean, you're off St. Louis, Detroit. These were top filing bankruptcy firms in their districts less than 5 years after graduating from law school. What leadership qualities do you think were key to implementing this policy, system, procedure, Ray Kroc, McDonald's type process?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was when we look at any business owner, they're part technician, they're part entrepreneur, and they're part manager. Okay. With professional services, a lot of times these business owners are great technicians. They're brilliant at what they do, but honestly, they suck at being a manager and they suck at entrepreneurship. They don't know how to market their services. They just want to bury their head in the work and do the work because that's where they shine. And so to me, when I found my managing attorney for each of the locations, they had to have that balance of entrepreneurship, manager, and technician. It helps you to be able to see the big picture and not get so bogged down in just working in your business instead of on it. And so that was the key characteristics for me for a leader to really be able to take over one of the locations.
So you were not just thinking strategically, you were recruiting and attracting people who could think strategically and because there's some people, not everybody's an entrepreneur. I mean, and that's not necessary. Some people that are born entrepreneurs, sometimes it's a curse because those people will be miserable unless they can find their entrepreneurial outlet. Entrepreneurs are depressed in a corporate setting from what I've seen, but
I would agree.
To make someone who's just perfect for even an entrepreneur role is it's a recipe for disaster. It's almost like, I don't want to say it's genetic or it's a chromosome, but it's a skill set that some people, it's just not worth the amount of work it would take to turn a non-entrepreneur into an entrepreneur. So what you're seeing is, you were seeing, in trying to get your time back, you were taking those strategic attributes that you had to learn to flex and recruiting for that, and then delegating the different offices, more or less. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. And then within those offices, they had to, I learned early on, you need to surround yourself with people who do things better than you do.
Right.
So I had a management team in St. Louis. I had a senior attorney that was in charge of my associates. I had a firm administrator that was in charge of all the support staff. And I had a marketing director that was in charge of building and growing the revenue. And those three people are who I eventually had most of my interactions with. That was my management team. So as we built out these other locations, we kind of followed that same model.
Okay. Well, and this goes on and on. I see around 2008. So fast forward about a dozen years. That's when you joined multiple mastermind groups. And and my question about mastermind groups is, I've been exposed to a few, but how has being a part of a group of like-minded individuals impacted your personal and professional growth?
Yeah, I think there's a couple times in my career where I could point to where there was quantum leaps in growth and revenue, not just revenue growth and revenue. So to me, the growth from a personal and professional standpoint always has to precede the growth from a revenue standpoint. And so joining these mastermind groups and being around people who have the same mindset, who truly didn't compete with each other and were open to sharing and helping to problem solve in that setting, was invaluable for me to come home. I would come home from those things. We had quarterly mastermind meetings, and I would come home with 26 action items, and I handed it to my management team and said, here's your task list for the next 90 days. And I got to go back to another mastermind meeting and report that these are done, and so that was key. And it was so key that I then joined another one for different reasons, right? This one, the first one, I was probably in the upper third, if you want to call, of advanced firms that were in there, right? So they always say, if you're the smartest person in the room, it's time to find a new room.
Right.
And I'm not saying I was the smartest person in the room, but as far as advancement on where the businesses were, I was probably number 2 or 3.
You were giving more advice than you were getting.
Yeah. So then I found another mastermind group that kind of branched off from that one, where I was probably in the bottom 2 or 3. Right. And now I'm learning from firms who were in the 8 and 9 figures. And so that was key to think, how did they go from where they're at now to 8 and 9 figures? Right.
Well, how did this, mastermind experience, I see like a progression. I know that you were motivated to actually sell your firm in 2014 and transition into a career in coaching.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
I'm when we talk about technician, entrepreneur, and manager, I was probably 90% entrepreneur, 5% technician. I couldn't care less if I practiced law. To me, it was a vehicle to build a business.
Right.
And so my kids weren't interested in law school. None of them. So I didn't have any partners. So I always was thinking of, what is my end game? And so my outside end game was, I don't want to be in the active practice of law past the age of 50. And so 2014, I sold the firms, and because I cultivated the right managing attorney for each location, they simply bought the firm from me, their location. And so I sold it in 2014 when I was 49. One of the reasons I decided to go into consulting is, my wife told me a long time ago, we're here to help other people. And so when we first started the firm, and it's me and her, and we're helping 3 or 4 families a week, and then all of a sudden we're doing 60 a week. And then, so we hired people so we can help that many. And then we opened in Detroit. Now we're doing 110, 120 a week. And it kept growing, right? So then in 2018, I did consulting from 14 to 18 locally with firms. And then I ran across How to Manage and started there in 2018 and left there in October to kind of do my own thing. So I would say since 2014, I've helped over 350 law firms grow their business. And, and so now I help them help more people, and I just keep expanding the circle of people that we help.
Beautiful. Well, and so I know you. That's where we met. We worked together.
Yes.
How to Manage. So I knew when I knew you as I was kind of an employee. You were more of an entrepreneur in that sense. Like, for example, you were pretty active, if not instrumental, in launching a small university within the company in the midst of a pandemic, and that's at that company. That's still a big part of their business. What strategies did you employ to grow that business unit?
Yeah, so internally, what we looked at was the difficulties in scaling the fractional C-suite. And it wasn't so much in finding law firms that needed help. It was in finding qualified consultants that could work with those law firms. So Small Law Firm University was a way that we could scale by building out college level courses that were mostly self-study. You still had an advisor that you worked with, but less often. But now we can scale it. We can have less advisors. And it only took, from the time we started launching it, we got the first courses built. It took about 2 years, and we had about 200 members in Small Law Firm University. So 200 law firms in Small Law Firm University. And that's when I transitioned from there. And they were like, hey, I would like to launch this CMO program. So now can you do that for us? So I switched to doing the CMO program.
Well, that's my next question is, your marketing expertise. What are some insights? Because I'm sure that was a different launch. That was not the same thing. It wasn't necessarily scaling. You weren't taking available policy, systems, procedures, practices, content. That program didn't even exist.
Right. So it was creation of the content. So I took everything that I had learned over 20 plus years studying Dan Kennedy and a lot of other direct response marketing. And that's really what I did differently when my firm went from 3 to 4 to 60 clients a week was I learned early on that we as human beings make decisions based on emotion, and then we back it up with logic, right? Most law firms are out there, and most professionals actually market to the logical side of the brain. They talk about themselves, their years of experience, how we care for you, and that's why they get mediocre results in marketing. But when you can target what really keeps somebody up at night on a deep level, you're going to get them to raise their hand and want more information. And that's all I did. And so creating the CMO program, it was teaching lawyers how to think differently and stop talking about themselves and target what keeps their prospects up at night. And, I have a firm right now that I'm working with that made $120,000 total last year. And he did $160,000 in May. And, so he is now that light bulb moment has gone off. And he is really taken a hold of the new marketing style, and it's working very well for him. So that's what I was trying to instill in the CMO program was changing how we think about marketing and driving prospects in.
And that didn't take 2 years. That was just 6 months from what I.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then changing gears, I guess, to personal growth. I mean, you've achieved a lot of things, explosive growth and various ventures and different avenues. The motivation. Usually I found motivation for most anything like this comes from whatever your personal goals are. How would you say you align those goals?
So funny that you say that because, we just celebrated Father's Day. And,
Happy Father's Day, by the way.
Thank you. And happy Father's Day. My wife posted on Facebook and basically said that your drive and commitment that is born out of people always telling you that you're not good enough. So when we talk about my motivation, that was it. Like I remember way back as a kid, my parents telling me, like, I wanted to try out for baseball. Oh, you can't do that. You're overweight. I wanted to go. My brother played baseball. My brother played basketball. Let me try basketball. Oh, you can't do that. And then I was like, let me play little league football. And you're like, oh, okay, you can do that. And I never stepped foot on the field, right? So, but they let me do it. And then comes junior high, and I'm like, I want to try out for football. And they're like, why? You didn't even step on the field. And so I've always had this drilled into me that you're not good enough. So I went ahead and went out for freshman football, and I ended up starting varsity. And I started for 4 years and then played college ball. And then in law school, I had people tell me that you're never going to make it as a lawyer. And in fact, one of the guys I clerked for, I was doing very well for his associate. His associate at least gave me good feedback. And then I got a letter from the owner saying, we no longer need you. That's all it said, one sentence. And when I asked the associate about it, he specifically said, the owner said, he'll never amount to anything as a lawyer. And so, like, I've always had this big FU on my back. And that motivates me to always show up, not just to be average. We don't freaking show up to be average. We show up and we excel. And so every day I'm always like, what's next? What's next? I don't want to get complacent where I'm at.
You're not setting, I want a Maserati. Your goal is if someone were to say you can't have one of those, that you'd have a better chance of getting one of those than if you just organically decided you wanted one.
Well, and interestingly enough, I had mentioned earlier that our goal has always been to help more people, right? And so my wife said this to me a long time ago. She said, at the end of the day, if you do what is right, the money will follow. And it always has.
Right.
It always has. And so we were just we were in church yesterday, and there was a lesson on leadership and the amount of people that you can help. And immediately I'm already thinking of new things that we can do. And on the way home from church, I'm like, just giving her all these ideas on how to scale this and help more business owners. And so that's my next phase. I have private clients I'm working with now, but I'm not going to get complacent. What's the next phase? So for me, it's a two-pronged approach. One is to start the mastermind groups, which we had our first one last Tuesday. And we're going to be doing that. And I'm taking new business owners in there. And then another thing is I'm going to launch a company that's a lot like Small Law Firm University, but for businesses in general. And I'm working with a company to help me build out the courses. So I foresee level 100, 200, 300, 400 courses. And so that's going to be something we launch in 2025. And then I want to help my kids build a business that now will create generational wealth. And so we are building a real estate business right now. With them, my kids are involved, and our goal is to have $100 million in assets in 10 years. And so we've got some big goals, and I know that we can reach those. And so every day I'm like, what are we doing today that gets us one step closer to that goal?
You mentioned generational wealth, and you mentioned helping as many people as you can. So in that vein of like legacy and influence, you've been recognized as one of America's top 20 premier experts in co-authoring a best-selling book. What do you want your legacy to be? And what advice would you give to an aspiring entrepreneur thinking of hanging a shingle or opening a business or leaving their job and security?
I think that I remember my second year in practice, and when I went into the judge's chambers, he had a sign above his desk that said, "We take debtors as we find them." Okay, and that kind of taught me that we don't judge people for how they got to where they are today, right? It doesn't matter. And so I would say I want my legacy to be someone who took people as they are today, no matter what help that they were looking for, and being able to give them a plan to move forward, so that they can achieve and build that life that they want to build. And that's different for everybody. Not everybody wants a multi-million-dollar business. They might want more time with their family. Well, it doesn't mean you can't have both. Right. And so for me, it's about building a business. If you're going to choose to go the entrepreneurial route, build something that is not an 80-hour week job for you, right? Step away. I was blessed to be able to do a lot of volunteer work with the Red Cross. And so because I had those systems in place, that office didn't need me to function. And so when the Red Cross would call and say, "I need you to go to Florida for a hurricane," and I would say yes, I had to leave within 24 hours. And we literally had a go bag, and we would be gone for 30 to 35 days at a time, and the business doesn't miss a beat. So I want people to be able to experience that freedom and not be chained to a business, and so I would say I want, my legacy to be somebody who takes people as we find them, and gives them that room and that path for growth, whatever it is for them, to achieve the life that they want to live. And so I want to do that for my kids, but I also want to do that for as many people as I can possibly help. And I think that's the gift that I've been given, is to help people do that.
Awesome. Well, let's say somebody that's watching right now wants to get in touch with you, wants to participate in a mastermind or get some one-to-one work. What are the best ways to get to you?
Yeah, I mean, you can. They can reach me through my cell phone number. That's always open. It's 314-358-2788, or they can email me at James B as in boy @perseverancesquared.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. There's also a Perseverance Squared Facebook group for anybody that wants to come in there. And then, I'm always posting things on there that's helpful to all business owners, so I'm always available. I can't say that I'm always going to take on private clients, because I'm going to keep that as a limited group, and because so then I can give the quality to people, and I don't want to have hundreds and hundreds of people trying to work with me personally.
But you run out of time. There's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so many days in the week, and
yep,
hundreds and hundreds. It's expectations would just never be met if you're spread too thin like that. But I love it.
Yeah.
The leveraging, the grouping, the mastermind, the legacy, all of it. It's great. James, I am so excited to have you as a guest. It was really excited when you agreed. I hope everyone enjoyed this, and thank you so much. And this has been Inappropriate Growth.